Good morning, dear panelists. Now, I'm very impressed that so many of you made their way through the terrible, surprisingly terrible weather to the venue. It would be a nice day to recline in your sofa and read a book, but we will talk about books today. I would like to briefly introduce the two panelists here. There is Mr. Sirish Rao. He has come a very long way, around half of the globe, from Canada. He is a writer, a festival producer, and a publishing professional. He's the co-founder and artistic director of the Indian Summer Festival in Vancouver. He has authored 20 books that have been translated into 17 languages, and he has received a number of international awards. Mr. Sirish is the former director of Tara Books and currently adjunct professor at the publishing department at Simon Fraser University, British Columbia. He is focusing on exploring old and new forms of the physical book. Then this gentleman here is Mr. Ralf Mollers. He has come not such a long way to Jaipur, but still he came from Germany. His publishing career began as an editor for a computer book publishing house in Munich. After this, he founded Systema, one of Germany's first multimedia publishing houses. In 1997, he founded another publishing house called Tertio, and they are publishing innovative multimedia for children. Besides this, he's developing, together with a Mumbai-based company, Book to Look, an online marketing tool for books. Having said this, I think it is obvious that our two panelists, they represent quite different, maybe even oppositional approaches to books.
In the blue corner.
And I think we should now start with the session itself. I will not take up more of their time because they have much more to say than I do. And since they promised to lead a nice, decent discussion, they don't need a moderator. And with this, I hand over to you. Thank you.
We'll be here. Thank you.
Yes, we promise to be good. So thank you very much. Well, this weather, since you mentioned it, is for the both of us coming from Canada, coming from northern Germany. I was born and raised in northern Germany. It's not really a big problem. I mean, in northern Germany, this time of the year, on a clear day, you can see your own furniture. So this is actually really nice weather, and I think it's wonderful to be here in Jaipur for the second time in my life. And when I was invited for this session, I misread the title. I thought you were quoting Madonna. Who's this book? Who's this girl? But we clarified that, and I think it's both titles would work, because we want to talk about the change in the role and the concept, in the appearance of the book. And I need to buy reading glasses, actually. I'm an old guy. So what I wanted to start with is the concept of a book that we all have been discussing in this industry, and it's our everyday life. The concept of the book is actually not a book. That's something that sounds very surprising to many people, that this should be an issue, but it's really something that is in this discussion that we're having over e-books and multimedia and online reading and all this kind of stuff, is something that we're always entangled in. People mix up the carrier medium book, the pages, the printing, with the concept, with the idea of a book. The idea of a book is either a story or information. The book is merely a carrier for this content. And when we're talking about literature festival, we're talking about stories, really. And that's why I'm very surprised that in Germany we are very much concerned with the atoms, not the bytes, not the content. For me, content is the bytes, the bits and bytes of the book. And you hear, very often you hear, the haptic quality of the book and this wonderful book, and this will all go away and there will be no more books. And I said, look, what are you talking about? This is, of course, there is an artisanal, if you wish, concept or perception of the book, and that will always be there. A wonderful book that's wonderful to touch and to read. But that's not what the core concept of a book is. A book, when we talk about literature, is again the story. And we talk too much about the atoms, I think. And then there's another aspect, or let me show you, let's do it the other way around. There is the artisanal, what I call the artisanal concept aspect of a book, is something that I would call a book, something that is very special about a book. And I brought two examples for you. One is about reading a book to your kids. It's the book with no pictures, and it plays with this idea that children's books have to be colorful and kids don't want to look at books that don't have pictures. And that's also true for all this multimedia and software stuff, where we think kids need a lot of diversion, a lot of stuff. And this book is the book with no picture, and it has to do with the reading of a book to your kid. And it might seem like no fun to have someone read you a book with no pictures, but then there's a deal. You have to read every page of this book, no matter what. And that's the deal, And then sometimes it says blork or blurf. And so you should get this book. This is really, really funny. If you have kids, this is about reading the book. That's a book. You want this as a book, has a wonderful typography, and it's about the act of reading a book. It doesn't really have a story. It's a book that deals with a book. Another example for this, where books are very good at being books, is this. It's this book just ate my dog. And what it is about, there's Bella taking her dog for a stroll across the page when something very odd happened. The dog disappears in the gutter of the book. And then other people come to help, and they all disappear in the gutter of the book. And in the end, Bella herself disappears in there, and then the note appears, and then the kid is asked to turn the book on the side and shake it, and they all come falling out again. So I think that's what I mean when I talk about the artisanal, the book character of books, and that will not go away at all. There will always be wonderfully creative artists, and one is with me on this wonderful sofa here, that will create these, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. But that being a book, the story, the concept of the story, will of course migrate to other forms of, to other transportation medium, if you wish. So there's another question or concern that we hear often: will people understand books if they read them on readers or on little screens? There's a lot of talk about that kids cannot understand well when they read electronically, which is obviously not true. There's a lot of studies out there, and they don't show that this is the case. And then there is this story of this concern of, oh, this is bad for reading, it's the end of the book, it's the end of reading skills for kids, and not only kids, adults as well, which is also a misconception, really. It's quite hilariously, actually, because we have never read, we, meaning the world population, has never read as much as in these years. Never ever in the 5,000 plus year history of the written word have more people read books in the wider sense of the word. So it's actually good news. And what we find today is that we have more choices in reading. And there are different forms of reading, obviously. I read a Facebook post in a much different way than I read a novel. I'm much more engaged with a good written novel and then with a text that I read for, I don't know, a letter from a business associate or whatever, or the manual for my coffee maker or whatever. So we have now more options. We can read with all our senses. We have multimedia options. We have something that I find is going to be very important. We have something that we call social reading. Reading is now networked within the text. It's networked. You have the hyperlinks. You can create contexts for all the things that you're reading. You can like on my Kindle, I love it. I hate Amazon, but I love my Kindle, that I have the Oxford Dictionary in it, and I can look up the words and the meanings, and I can go to Wikipedia and understand better what I'm reading. That's a wonderful networking. And I can network with people. We have developed in our little company a social reading platform where people can read books together. The book itself, the story itself becomes the community of readers. Authors can join their readers inside the book and exchange notes and talk about it. That's a new quality, a new dimension of the book that hasn't been there before, the community. And it stresses the most important point for me of the book. A story is participation. That's what it's all about. I participate in the world of the author. I participate in somebody else's world. And the new forms of books that we have make this participation easier. They add many layers and dimensions to it. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I'm very thankful that I'm in publishing at this time at this point of the development. So that's what I wanted to say. We're going to see in the future reading be more social, more networked. We'll see become more multimedia where it makes sense. Some areas it doesn't make sense where we've tried it, but multimedia will be an important factor. And we will need, that's the sad part of it, in the future we will need more and more machines for reading. So just the printed text and you alone with a book at the chimney or at your child's bed, that's going to be this stuff. The other reading will need machines. So that's maybe a grim perspective, but I think it offers a lot of choices. And that's what I wanted to say. So have no fear. It's going to be great. Okay, that's my statement for the beginning.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, thanks, Nita. Thank you for putting this all together and for inviting us here. And thanks for this sofa. It feels very romantic.
Yeah, much better. Yeah, too many people, though.
No one I'd rather share it with. So, no, I mean, I think we're going to fight less than I thought, because I do agree with Ralph that the argument of e-book versus physical book is getting a little tiring, and we need to look at it from a different way. But I really like the fact that this panel is called Who is a Book, because that takes it away actually from its physical form and brings it closer to the way I think I and a lot of people who love literature have always seen books, as kind of human beings. In a way, whenever I read, it was not only the quality of understanding what was in the book, but also the feeling of being understood. And so books always had this human quality to me. Some books are friendly, others are foreboding, some bring with them a universe of friends, others give you solitude, some present you with fact, and others weave fantasy, and I think some provide you with shelter and some with adventure. And so I always, I think, saw books as quasi-humans who, one of the books would be like a wheezy uncle with the odd wise thing to say, and the other one is this irritatingly intelligent nerd who has the answers to everything. And so I think from that title, what I started to think about is not necessarily the form of the book, but what do books do to you? What's that quality that books have on either giving you a little vision of the world or drawing you into their universe for a while. So I think that experience, as Ralph was saying before, is at the heart of it. And yet, I confess, I'm also deeply in love with the bookness of the book as it is. And so I feel a lot of the fear is kind of unfounded. I think the idea of a linear narrative where suddenly the physical book disappears and e-book takes over is not quite right. Even now, I think it has, people have seen that people who buy e-books also buy physical books, and they do both. And I guess what I started thinking about in all of this was the need to acknowledge a kind of particularity for a book. That some books may demand a physical form. Some books may demand an artisanal making. Other books will thrive if they found a digital platform. And it's so different for each one. It's all these human beings. It's all these different individuals that these books are. And I think it's very hard, even though we, to some extent, try to speak of all books in the same way. And this is something I faced a lot in children's publishing. People would say, children will like this. And I would say, how children? I mean, you don't say adults will like this book. How do you end up creating this huge category where, some children are gloomy, some are humorous, some are, not interested in books at all. So in the same way, I think we need to recognize the particularity of books themselves and see whether form, content meet. And so in some ways, I do agree with Ralph that, we'll find different ways of reading. But on the other, I'm also interested in those books in which form and content are not separate things. That book can only be that way because it must. And as an example, like this is a book that was published at Tara Books, and it came out of trying to explore how could we work with some of the older storytelling traditions in India. And one of them is the Patua tradition of West Bengal, where wandering minstrels walk around with this scroll, a painted scroll, and they start unfurling the scroll and singing a story along with it. And so you get to see bit by bit by bit by bit until they've unfurled the whole thing, and you've got the whole picture. And it was a beautiful, visually beautiful, culturally fantastic piece of storytelling. And how does a linear book couldn't have grabbed that, couldn't have done justice to that. And so this was an experiment in a book where it opens out like a scroll. And then you see, and you have the text on the side, which is not part of the original tradition, but that was one way of capturing something that was otherwise an oral experience, a visual experience, in something that could still fit on a shelf, take a barcode, be shrink wrapped, packed, and sent across. So in that sense, I think there are still many explorations left to do with the physical book itself. And then at the same time, I was thinking, there's a lot, I really don't know that much about the possibilities that ebooks offer and digital books offer, but I could see that something like this, like an oral storytelling tradition, could have so much. I know exactly what the app looks like for this book. So, I mean, I'm very excited by that, because I think, especially in the Indian context, there is so much that we can do to look at traditions that got bypassed, actually, by the book. So we went from an extremely strong oral storytelling culture to then a book culture, which is still relatively new in many languages here. And then we can now try and find a space for some of this. So that's what's exciting to me. I mean, a couple of millennia ago, Plato argued that reading and writing, those physical acts, would destroy our memories and our ability to converse with each other. So that itself was seen as one part of our facilities going. I can see another whole bunch of facilities going as technology goes along, I still, I can't remember barely any phone numbers anymore because I've got this mobile, and I used to be. So in my own,
You mean you make phone calls with your phone? You're very old-fashioned.
I should show you my phone. So I think there's all this. It's a complex, interesting field, but I'd love to hear from you, Ralph. How do you see the app?
Oh, it's done. I mean, it's very, very clear. This is wonderful. This will even work on a very small smartphone, which is good. You have this story, this beginning, and then you can choose if you want to listen to the story or if you want to read it.
Right.
And then the kid could, decide the speed with which it goes, and then sort of this moves, pans across this, and these wonderful illustrations move along the screen, and you can decide if you want to read it to your kid, and then you just read the text and you do it, or you have the kid play with it, well, listen to it alone and have it read to it, unless the kid can read itself. I think the electronic medium will actually add another dimension to this. But nevertheless, this is a wonderful piece of art, of work. This is a great thing to touch, and we have this haptic word, this H word. It's wonderfully done, and I would not hesitate to buy this for my kid. My daughter is now 30. She will probably not listen to me anymore. But when she was little, of course, we read a lot of books, and I think this is great because it has a different form of presentation, and that's what I think is important. And we explore new forms of presentation. We have been doing chess books for kids that come with an app where you can learn to play chess, and what you've just read and seen in the story you can translate into the actual game of chess. Things like that used to be totally different routes, where we would have fences between all those media in the past. These fences will go away, or are going away, if they're not already gone. And I think it's just entirely wonderful. And I think when everybody in the traditional publishing industry has relaxed again and has lost the fear, there will be much more very, very interesting things. And there will be a lot of projects where everybody agrees, well, this is a book. It should be a book and remain a book. It works fine as a book. And I have published a lot of nonsense and a lot of failures where I tried to, screw stuff onto a book because it was possible. That's not going to work. Of course not. Yeah. And then kids say, well, what is this? I want to hear the story. I don't want to decide now if he fights with this guy, and I want to know what the author has to tell me. And that's one thing that we were learning a lot about. This non-linear narrations, and there are areas where this is going to work, but the story concept doesn't work like that. I want to participate in an author's world. I want this lady to decide, is he going to die or not? Is she going to fall in love, and will they marry? I want to be surprised. They have to do that. I don't want to sit there. It's like watching TV. If they would stop every 5 minutes, say, what should we do now? I say, what? If you don't know,
that's your job.
That's your job. So I mean, that's gonna be there. That's the way storytelling has been since we gathered around the fire after we learned to make one. And so I think that's still at the core of this our wonderful industry.
Yeah, I mean, I find this is why I was particularly excited to be speaking to someone who has thought about this a lot, because I think in India, this is a huge opportunity to look at this magnificent traditions that can be reworked, that can find a new space. And the other thing, of course, that we have right now in India is a strange thing where you have nearly 1 billion mobile phones.
Yep.
And those are already these content delivery packages in people's hands. So now we need to look at content and use that, and why should books not be
absolutely
one of the things that goes through there because everything else is on there. And strangely, it doesn't seem to hold as much fear for many people as sometimes the physical book did to first generation learners. So it's an odd thing. In the seduction of technology, I think we could try and use that in some way to look at how books, and then if we could find oral books on those devices, we could merge these two, this skipped beat in between and find that place. So I mean, I think that to me is the most exciting ground to walk.
Absolutely. So, I mean,
sure.
There you go.
Just more of a sort of comment. The book is beautiful, the tsunami book. The accordion folds, kind of evocative of the waves of the sea. I think that's really beautiful and really tactile. One of my favorite memories of childhood is being taken to the public library for the reading sessions for children, and the librarian would sit at the front of the room and flip through the pages and read. I can even just sort of remember the sound of the pages being turned and her
the smell.
Yeah, and the smell and a quiet sort of half hour with her. And I want to talk about the two articles that I read in the last year. One of them was from the New York Times, I think, and how we are retaining knowledge differently according to which way we read, if we read it on a Kindle or if we read it on a physical hard copy book, or paperback. And what do you think about that? I mean, and also, like, for example, I read recently The Quiet American on my Kindle, wishing that I had read it in paper so that I can refer to it again and know where the page falls, open it for a certain quote that I really love. And also, there was an article in the FT recently, a few weeks ago, about the falling sales of Kindles. They're kind of dropping off. They're sort of 70% down or something like that. And I talked to somebody who's a New York Times book reviewer, and he said when he reads for himself, he doesn't want to read on a Kindle because he reads all day on the computer. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I'm the total opposite of that. I rather not read a book if it's not available as ebook. Depends on the book, of course. If I really want to read it and it's only on paper, I grumpily accept the fact that I have to read it on paper, and then I'll do. But if I read it on paper, I have to spoil the book with my remarks and write things in it. And on the Kindle, I can just mark stuff, and I can exchange those marks with people. I like a certain type of book, not my mystery stories. I read those alone for me, and they could be on this cheap pulp paper, and I throw them away. There's nothing for my shelf. There are books that I want to have on my shelf, and that's a choice I have. But I would say 90% of my reading, at least 90% of my reading is on ebooks, and I love the e-ink readers. I agree, reading on like an iPad on a screen is very strenuous on the eyes, and it's hard to concentrate. And I would think that reading on a screen, it does make a difference for memorizing the text, understanding it fully in its depth, and so on. On an e-ink reader, I don't see any difference, and I'm old. I have bad eyes. I can adjust the size of the letters to my liking, and in the evening I need much bigger letters than in the morning. And not after coffee I need small letters, and then I can handle small letters. I would say. So I don't, and I've been looking up a lot of the studies about electric e-reading and understanding text, and there seems to be a slight difference. It takes a bit more effort, complicated texts in nonfiction books for students. But overall, the difference is really insignificant. That's what almost all of the studies come up with. And second, the aspect of the declining sales of the Kindle, that's wonderful. I think that's really great. We in Germany, we have a great situation that all of the other retailers of books have built an alliance, a coalition, and developed a reader, the Tolino, which is much more successful now than the the Amazon Kindle is, and so it gives an alternative to the buyers to buy from somebody else. I think we're seeing a leveling off, and that just proves the point. Some people decide to read on paper, absolutely wonderful. Some people decide to read in a different way. The people that read on e-readers or online or social add a certain dimension to it. If you want that, if you need that, is totally up to you. I'm not saying this is good and this is bad. This is new, yes, and this is old, yes, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we're changing the way we think. I mean, we did that when we went from memorizing things and then repeating them to writing to this. So, and probably we're changing faster than ever before. Okay. But you see kids nowadays, this and this is kind of, in a 3-year-old, you'll see that instinctive movement when they come across a flat surface. So, but you know, I still think too that we'll see all these things happen. So, you know, when I started off saying particularity of books is important, by that I also mean diversity, because from particularity comes diversity, and I hope that's something that as publishers from very different areas we can hold together. Yeah?
Yeah, we've been struggling over this, and we will be struggling over this, and in the end, the book wins.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to jump into our next session now. Oh, sorry.
There was one more question. No, we want to have the French perspective, please.
Okay, yeah.
No, I have a question to the writer, actually, because we talked a lot about how the digital revolution impacted the way we read, but how does it impact the way we write? Because in Finland, recently, they decided kids would not learn to write with a pen anymore, but only directly on the screen. So I just would like to have your view on this.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that is a great question, because ideally, with the changing form, you start to rethink as well the possibilities for content. And even while doing books like this, which are, you know, quite artisanal piece of work, I was always very interested in the book, not necessarily as a repository of information, but as a site for art as well, to use its form as an inspiration to do something. So I think now, you know, that's why I'm so excited by what could be possible, because we might end up blurring the lines between what is a book, what is a film, and what is a song, because a book might now well contain all three of these things. And that is a little scary, then what do you call a book and what do you not call a book? But it's also very exciting for a writer to now imagine that halfway through you break off into a different medium, then you write for a different medium, you construct the book kind of spatially rather than in a linear fashion. And I think that does something very interesting to your brain. And you know, I would love to learn what is possible so as to be able to have those adventures. Yeah,
yeah, and it's clear one of the victims of the development is handwriting. I'm afraid that's true.